All right, everybody, welcome back to our favorite show, the Over Sharon Show, with myself, Brandon, and my lovely co-host Sharon, who the podcast is
Grazie.
named after. Prego, prego. Um, yeah, so we have a great show for you today. It's going to be another free flow, so Sharon's definitely nervous, but it's cool. We're going to get through this. But we're going to start the way we always do. We're going to keep it a little consistent here. I have a quote. If I could find the quote, here it is. The quote is, "No one is powerless, ordinary, or insignificant. To claim so is to say the divine infinity is also these things. If we change our imagination of ourselves, we can live in our lives as the incarnate ocean and not as the disconnected droplet, as infinity and not only as far as the eyes can see." That quote was by David Icke.
Hmm. I like the whole imagination visualization stuff. Reminds me of Neville Goddard.
Yeah, how dare you?
I dared.
Do you have a
Oh, I was going to
tarot
show
card?
you.
Yeah.
So, thanks to a fellow listener named, well, I think his name in the chat is Bruce, but his name's Mark. And I met him through a meetup group. And he donated some cards to me that were from
Ooh.
his late mother. So I have a Thoth deck here, a very large one, mind you. And I have some other decks too.
So you manifested some tarot decks just by having a show about doing tarot on it.
Yeah. And I manifested the deck, the first ever deck that I got a reading from someone like I went to that rock store that first rock store I ever went to, and this lady named Jane, she did a reading for me with this deck, and I didn't even know the name. I still don't think I know the name of it, but I wanted the deck, but I didn't know where to get it, and here it is.
Dude, that's awesome.
Isn't that cool? And then
Party like a rock star.
and then here's this stone but I remember how you told me to get a universal weight deck?
Yeah.
Well, I got one.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have one of those decks. They're good. I have that same exact deck. That's crazy.
You do?
Yep.
Yeah, it's a really nice deck. So, and I got just a regular good old Rider-Waite.
Yep.
Yeah.
That looks more like the not the universal, the other one. I forget what it's called. But yeah.
Yeah, it's just a typical Rider-Waite.
Yep. Nice.
So you pick. Tell me which one you want me to pull from today.
I think you should pull from the one that you wanted to get anyway. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Well, I was like struggling inside because I was also thinking.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I was like, But no, I think that's the one.
This is the one. All right. So I'm shuffling.
Every day I'm shuffling.
Yep. All right. The Four of Pentacles.
Ooh.
Let's see without it reflecting here.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. It's similar to the Rider-Waite, but just more zoomed in and more detail. But yeah, I like it. And the Rider-Waite, his feet are actually on too, because you could see him sitting on a throne. But that's we
Tell
talked
me
about
that card.
Well, we talked about fours before. I think we had the Four of Wands recently. Or maybe I was just having a reading.
It's for stability, right?
Yeah,
we did.
Stability. It's like a foundation, and it's also a little bit about celebrating when you get that foundation, and it's a pentacle. So I would say it's something about like it could be your work, how you support yourself, it could be your family, stuff like that, very earthly things. But I think in regards to this show, it would be our solid foundation of great listeners that we have. Shout out to the chat right now. I can't talk, but that's all right. So yeah, shout out to them because they're really part of this solid foundation that we're starting to build. So we're really excited because we have all these fresh new ideas that we're getting from the internet and from people talking about really crazy stuff. So I feel like we're able to dilate it down for people so they can get a nice, neat package every Thursday night on YouTube, and they can chat and hang out and hear some new crazy ideas that we're going to be talking about today, actually.
Yeah. I feel like your mic is a bit hot because I feel like it's like, I don't know if it's just me or what, but.
Oh, you know what? I know what's going on. I've been recording through the camera. Ooh. And my mic wasn't on. But now it's on. So I'll fix that in the audio.
Yeah. You need to be a little louder then, because now I can't really hear you that well.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but I kind of need to turn up my volume to hear you very well.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Your speakers.
Yeah.
Technical difficulties here in the Oversharing show, which we really hardly never have. So talks amongst yourselves.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Talks amongst yourselves.
Yeah. So if you need to do that while I can just kind of show people some of the cards if you want to fix that.
Well, it's already on, so I'm hoping how's it sound? Good?
I guess. I mean, I have to turn you up for myself, but which turns me up, I feel, but it's okay. Well, as long as you can figure it out in the end.
Yeah. I think we'll be all right. This is the setting I always have it on when we record, so I just had it off.
Okay. Then I'll just be I'll feel very loud.
Okay.
All right. Anyway.
Sharon's so loud right now. No.
I might be loud. Yeah. Well. So go on.
So that's what the Four of Pentacles, I would say, represents for this show. So yeah, we're just building on a foundation of a lot of the stuff we talked about. It's really just like our belief system, how people should be in the world. And I mean, if you choose to, we're not pushing it on anybody, but how people should be in the world and how we model our behavior, stuff like that, and different belief systems. So this has just been a really solid foundation to bring us to the next step, which is going to be investigating some of these ideas like we did with the Law of One episode. And we're going to be doing in the future. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, geez, I feel very loud. Let me just turn myself down a little bit. Good God, I'm scaring myself.
This is like, people are like, did they plan this for like slapstick comedy purposes? This is kind of funny.
What was I going to say? I lost my train of thought. Oh, so last time, hopefully, based on how these episodes play out, should be last time. We talked a little bit about Archaix's work at the very end after we talked about the Law of One. And one of the reasons we did was because we wanted to talk about how these things could potentially line up as we've been going through them kind of simultaneously. We're seeing a lot of parallels, but like the various people who are teaching about these different topics are seeing things from their own perspective. And so Brandon and I are looking at both of them and going, okay, how can we marry them a little bit and still see how they kind of tie together and how they make sense together, because both people that are looking into, like both people that we're watching on YouTube talking about these two topics are very well versed in the topics and have done a lot more research on them than we have. So we're not saying that they're at all wrong in their views on these things, but that their viewpoints are based on how they've gone through this material and how they've looked at it. And so if we introduce another viewpoint, how can it alter it so that we can kind of see it in a better light when we mesh them together? I don't know if I'm even saying that in the best way, but that's, maybe Brandon can clarify.
No, I like what you said so far. It's really good. It's very true. We're just trying to reconcile these two different viewpoints. And it's kind of like when we talk about allegory, we're just taking out of what they're saying, because we realize that, and this is true to pretty much everybody that we both are fans of, like even Crow 777 or Owen. You know that there's a lot of experience there. There's a lot of wisdom and quote unquote gravy. So these people have really dedicated their lives to looking into some stuff. So you know that there's truth there. But then it gets to, after they find this truth, then they filter it through their own viewpoint, which anybody would, right? Their own worldview, which has been molded by everything that's ever happened to them. So because people have different experiences, some people come to different conclusions. And I'm not saying that Sharon and I agree with all the conclusions that all these people make, but we definitely like the truth that they're into, and we know that they're, doesn't seem like they're lying or trying to fool anybody. Even if they they're really putting out good information, but it's just up to us how we discern it. So we take that information, instead of saying, oh, this guy thinks that, you know, the world is a ball, or the world is flat, or we went to the moon, or we didn't go to the moon. But instead of that, we step back, right? And we look at the facts that they're giving us and the dedication and their good intention. And that's kind of what we align with. And that's what we're going to be really doing going forward. And that's kind of always what we said, because we'll quote like Owen Benjamin or James True or Mark
Passio.
Or Michael Tessarion. Yeah, good sync. And all these people, if you got them in a room, they probably fight. But, as they should, because that's their worldview, right? And so we're just saying that it'd be cool to get to look at some of these ideas through the same lens and just kind of take the truth behind it and leave the rest to, maybe we can have a debate one day about that, but let's get to the truth first, you know, like about their level, how they see it. And again, we talked about this in the Law of One, where channeling, where when it comes through, people just are seeing it from their point of view, because at the end of the day, they're really the one that are, the channeler is the one that is conveying this information. They might be in touch with some higher source, but it's not the higher source speaking. It's the higher source relaying through, closer to like what telepathy is, which I just found out kind of blew my mind, where the like telepathy is allegedly more about feelings and emotions and transferring those to people, but not direct words, not like we talk. Because we've even talked before, like, should we talk or should we eat? You know, all these fun ideas we've had. Well, they're starting to kind of line up. In telepathy, when you look at it that way, it's much different with you know, just conveying emotions and thoughts. But yeah, so that's what we want to start, or that's what we're going to do. But I just wanted to open up with that idea, kind of to allow you to come along, just like when you go watch a movie, or you suspend your disbelief. That's what they call it, suspension of disbelief, and you just look at and you allow yourself to be entertained. But in that same way, you could suspend your disbelief of the other person's worldview, whereas, oh, they think that we didn't go to the moon, or they think we went to the moon, or, you know, they think the world's flat, or it's a realm, or it's a spinning ball. But like, just forget about that stuff and focus on the gravy that potentially could be there, is what I'm saying.
The commonality.
And the commonality, yeah, the common ground. Because if you really think that we're in some kind of either battle against evil or even our inner evil, if you're going to start to align yourself with people, I think those would be the qualities that you want to share. That's more important, is how they're you know, like, do they live by the golden rule? Do they follow like what we call natural law or karma? And are they screwing people over, or are they good people? And do they just want to be left alone? Like, but they do want to hang out and have a good time. I think that's where we could aim for our common goal of battling evil, quote unquote, whatever, if you want to do it in the external that way. And again, we're not here to like raise any armies or whatever, but you're in God's army now. That's what they used to make us sing in the Marines. No, actually, I don't think we sang that one.
In church.
Yeah, in
We
church
sang.
in boot camp. Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm just saying, I remember in church, we used to sing like as little kids, we used to sing like, I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. Or something like that.
yeah, that's not conditioning.
That's not indoctrination at all.
No. All right, we don't like to have sarcasm. That's total indoctrination. That's terrible. How could you make it? That's probably why
How dare you?
I remember that one not being in the Marine Corps when I'm like, I wonder why they're not singing it. And then now I was like, oh, now I know why they didn't have us sing it, because they don't want to make it so obvious, Like they're already there. We don't need to get them hyped up to go there. Funny jokes on the Oversharing show, but yeah, that's
Good
the
stuff.
commonality that we're looking for, especially when we're going to look at this, because this guy Jason, his channel is Archaix. He was in a prison. I was going to say Florida, in Texas, for over 20 years, and basically what happened with him was, at the time, this was the late 80s, I guess, and he got in trouble for some stuff when he was 17. And the way it worked back then was similar to how it works here in Connecticut, actually, because I know some people who've been in the joint, if you know what I mean. And what they'll do is they'll say, all right, you make a plea bargain, we'll give you 10 years, but you only serve 2. And then if you're good for 2 years, sometimes it's even 6 months. If you're good for 6 months, we'll let you out. You just don't screw up. And then you have like parole, or what do they call it here? Probation, until your total sentence is up. So he got some kind of deal like this where I think it was 20 years, but they're only going to make him do like not even a quarter of it, right? Like maybe a few years. And so he made the deal, and then George W. Bush became the governor of Texas and wanted to cut down on crime. So he somehow got it changed to where all those sentences, all those people had to do the full term. So he ended up having to do 20 years instead of like 2 or 3 or 4. So,
Holy smokes.
and they fought it in court. He said, this is all stuff he said. They fought it in court, and then Bush became president, and then nobody wanted to know nothing. So he basically just did all this time, and he ended up using the time to read all these books that they had, because anytime they would close a prison in Texas. And so we've heard this from somebody else. So it's kind of like we confirm this, but somebody we know that has studied the Masons heavily said that in Texas, they did that in the 1800s because prison was more about actual reform. It wasn't like it is nowadays where they're looking for like slave labor, allegedly, or whatever. Back then, they're actually trying to reform people, not get them institutionalized, so they just keep repeat offending and going back to jail because they can survive better in there than they can out here because they're heavily traumatized. It wasn't like that back in the 1800s all the time, but anyway, it was more, they were trying to rehabilitate these people, so they would put all these books that the Masons had their hands on in Texas, because there was allegedly a lot of Masons in Texas. So they flooded the prisons with these books, and then fast forward to now, all these books are just sitting in basements, because anytime they closed a prison, they wouldn't throw anything away. They just take all the books and bring them to the new one. And then they would end up as like cup holders for people, or like TV props and stuff. So he said he basically just went around and read all these books, some of them from the 1800s that you can't get today, that just had this total different take on history and all this stuff that we have conjecture about these days, like the pyramids. They pretty much, not that they had it nailed, but they had a better understanding of what that was. That's just one example, but there's tons of them. So this guy just read all these books. He became a librarian. He was, reaching out to other prisons, getting all these old books. So that's all he did. He said basically he just read all day, and then every weekend he'd get his typewriter and just make notes. And then when his family came, he would just give them all the notes. So he has it all. So he wrote a bunch of books. He has all his sources cited, all the bibliographies and everything, so you can actually go and check it all out. So it's really crazy what he started to find, which I guess I can let Sharon talk here because I've been talking a lot and it's her turn. But
yeah.
about
So
the
what?
resets and stuff. But anyway, go ahead.
What I remember as well is that he also at some point started kind of creating his own calendar system, not only for the stuff he was finding in the books, but also for his own life. Like he was journaling, like saying this thing happened to me on this. And so he was, he was documenting things that happened, like if he got into a fight, if he changed from one prison to another prison or a jail or whatever, he would document everything that was happening every day. So he started seeing patterns with numbers. He started to notice, he was trying to do the same thing that most people do with phi and pi and other numbers. And it wasn't working, but he found a way where it made more sense when he multiplied pi and phi together. And then he got this other number. And then if he used that in a certain way, and I don't remember all the details, but it was, it became obvious to him that there was a number, that there was this number or this numerical value that represented every time there was like a great reset or even a small reset. And he started documenting these and naming these events based on what was happening during that event. So I think we mentioned briefly last episode, but one of them was called a Phoenix event. The other one was called like a Nemesis event, I think too. But he also noted that the period between these events was like, it was 138 years, right? 138, was it? 138 years between those events or the multiple of. Like if it wasn't 100, like if it didn't happen at the 138 years, then maybe it would happen 138 years after that. So it was like a multiple of that. And he just started seeing how like he would take it and go backwards in time and forward in time and see like how things were happening, and like seeing things like the Mayan calendars and other topics. Was it Aztec or Mayan? I don't even remember, but how they were also talking about future events that might happen, right? And he has this number 2040 and 2046. And those are apparently the next time something is going to happen, of something that is cataclysmic, perhaps potentially. But he talks, there's so much more that I'm not touching on, but I was just remembering about he became a chronologist, because the only way he could see to take all these books, all this material, and make sense out of it was to say, okay, what date was that? What date did they say that happened? What date did they say this happened? And when he started using that, then he started being able to, and these are from books from like all kinds of different backgrounds. Like it didn't matter if it was like Sumerian or if it was, Native American or whatever. All these started to, they were telling similar stories sometimes. And a lot of things started to click and make sense for him. And now he's kind of like himself. He would, if he heard this word, he probably would say that he too is an aggregator, because he basically took what all those books were saying and he made sense of everything. In like, now his material that he puts out is basically just gleaning from all of that and mapping it out into something that makes sense for everybody. So we're kind of aggregating off him. But
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, it's just mind blowing, the information that he's come across.
Yeah, totally. And something I wanted to say, because so you talk about these dates, 2040 and 2046, and that's when he's saying that the next resets will occur. And I just want to say that when people hear that, they could get scared, and that's not what we're here. We're not in the oversharing show. We're not here to spread any fear, but because he says that those events have been misunderstood and that they're not what we're told. So, and he's even saying in 2040, it's supposed to affect like Asia or that part of the world or whatever. So it won't even be over here. But what he's saying is his main message is if you don't have fear, and just like we probably said this last week, but Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah, if you're just one of those, and you don't have to be like this super righteous monk, that's not what we're saying. We're just saying that if you don't live in fear and you're just doing what you're supposed to, basically, not fucking people over, and you have no fear, that it just doesn't even affect you.
Low vibes, high vibes.
Yeah, if you have a higher vibration and you don't let things bother you, that it won't even affect you. And I think that another thing he said that's really big is I've been watching some of his videos about these isomeric predictions that he's making, and the way it works, and we've talked about this on the phone but not on the show, where he'll take an event like 1902, I guess was the last time about the reset, and that's the last time there was some kind of reset that happened. And he's saying that after that, if you take 43 years in the future, so that'd be 1945, that's when the atomic bombs were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And this is what he's saying too, because he'll make some predictions about the future. When he talks about nuclear exchanges and stuff, he's saying it might be faked. It might be, doesn't mean they're really going to do it, but there might be some kind of like people saying they did, because a lot of people will say like Hiroshima, Nagasaki, they were just fire bombs. There wasn't really nukes going on. They weren't even in the top 10 most damaged cities in the war in Japan. So, that's all we've talked about, that and scarcity of resources. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah. So, these events basically, oh man, I think I lost my train of thought. But
1902, and then you push to
yeah. There we go. Sorry. 43 years in the future. It's, this gravy is just so dense. 43 years in the future, you have the detonation of the atomic bombs over an enemy. And then, so 43 years before 1902, 1839, I think it was, or something. 49, I can't remember, but whatever year it was, that's when the Carrington event happened, where all these telegraph lines like got started on fire and like all this stuff happened. It was supposed to be like a solar burst hit us or whatever. So, but there's also all these other ones that line up if you use 1902, that have to do with the Civil War, and then have to do with the reunification or the unification of Germany at the time, like in the 1880s. And then they swing forward to the future the same amount of years from 1902 forward, where they have something to do with World War I or II, where they correspond. And he's shown a few of those, but I'm sure there's tons of them. So his whole conclusion with this stuff is that he thinks we live in some kind of simulacrum, some kind of simulation, just because of all the math. And to me, I don't really care what his conclusion is, because his information is so good. That's what we're saying. I think it's really interesting. I don't know, because I haven't seen anything about the simulacrum as far as in the books and stuff, like other people, what they've said about it. Now, people have definitely alluded to it, in different cultures. They say like we're in a dream state. So, there's people talking about simulation theory and stuff like that. But I also think that we can live in some kind of magical realm where that's the way it is. It's just mathematic, and that's just another part of it, and we're hitting that layer of it. And it doesn't mean we're necessarily in a simulation, but it's possible. If that's what happened, I'd be like, I'm not that surprised,
Right.
So, but our ideas are so close that it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. I want to hear more about other stuff, like, and also about this whole no fear thing and how to manifest stuff and how we should really live. Like that's really, because then you kind of start using this, whatever it is, realm to your own advantage. And it seems that from all these different things we're getting into, that it'll mirror back to positivity if that's what you put into it. But if you put fear and anger and stuff, that's what you're going to get in your life, and the turbulence, and then shit's going to happen to you, like because you were afraid of it, you can actually bring it into that causality because you imagined it. Now you're making it a possibility. Whereas people that are living with no fear, it's not even an option for them. Like they're just going to be fine no matter what happens. Like in the stories that we heard too, the guy from uh the Doobie Brothers, was it that group? One of those guys was, anyway, he was in a
Michael McDonald.
Michael McDonald. No,
It wasn't he a Doobie Brother?
was he? Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Maybe it was a different. Anyway,
Mm.
Jason Archaix told a story. One of these guys who was like before he was a rock star, he was in some pickup truck like when he was 16 or 17 with another guy. And they were flying down this country
That
road.
story. Tell it. Oh my God.
Flying down a country road, and a kid runs out, so they veer off to not hit him. They end up flying through a cornfield toward a giant tree. And he said, the rock star guy, whoever he was, maybe he was the Doobie Brother, he closed his eyes right before they hit the tree, and then nothing happened. Then he opened his tree, and they were already past.
Opened his
eyes, and they were already past the tree. And there's a witness too, allegedly, that just saw the truck kind of like disappear and then reappear on the other side of the tree. So there's a lot of these kind of crazy stories that we hear, about UFOs and all this stuff. So what if it could be just the way this realm works, where forces will come to your aid when you don't have fear of something and you just accept it, or whatever it is. I don't know exactly how it works myself, but this seems like to be going in the right direction. And so this is what his overall message is too, that I really love. And that's more the stuff I want to kind of delve into.
Yeah. But that whole topic that you're talking about makes me think of the law of one, because that's one of the reasons why I want to see how it meshes with the law of one, because the law of one is talking about us living in a 3D space, which, hey, if it's a simulation, so be it, right? But we're living in this incarnation, which allows us to experience free will without any memory of what happened prior. So any past memories of any previous lifetimes or whatnot are wiped. So we always have, every time we come into this realm, either to relive, to continue life, because we didn't make, come to the place where we made realizations yet. We have that free will to choose whether we're going to polarize positive or polarize negative. And I heard Jason talk about this in one of his recent videos. He did like a 3-hour tour, 3 hours and 19 minutes with this guy, Jay Cambell. Oh my gosh, that one was really, really good. I never thought I would finish it, but it was so good. I like had it on like 1.5. I couldn't do 2x. It's too much, but I tried to listen to 1.5, and then I would slow down where I felt like I wanted to listen to and capture more information that I hadn't really heard him talk about before. And he talked about so many things, but I think that's one of the things he mentioned about he didn't call it veil of forgetfulness, but he basically said, we chose, or this how he sees it, that we chose to come to do this, and that we had to forget, or else it wasn't going to work. if we remembered everything that happened prior to coming into the incarnation, or, whatever he calls it. I don't know how he describes it, but he also sees the evidence for reincarnation because, and I've seen it too. I've seen, not personally, but I've heard accounts of people saying that little children will say that they have children in the other town, in the other village next door, and they just died and they just left children, and they'll go and they'll find those children there with those names. It's just bizarre. It's like the mother or the grandmother died and reborn in a neighboring town to someone else. And it's just like you're just coming back to relive the experience and learn more, perhaps. Could it be?
I think it totally could be. And even if it's not exactly that, it's really close. So, that's the thing. You try, and if that makes sense to you, then that's how you live your life. And you can treat it like a test. It's kind of like all this 2020 stuff. I look at it as a test. The government put us through a test, and some of us passed, and some of us failed. But we all made it through, right? Most of us. But I think you guys
we're here.
Yeah, but not everybody. There was some sacrifices to the experimental medical serum, allegedly. But anyway, that's
I just mean like those of us who are here.
Yeah, that are listening. I'm just trying to be funny about everybody getting through this. But yeah, some passed this test, some failed it. But I think we're tested every day. And even if you fail, if you're still here in this body, you have another chance it's going to come back around, and you have another chance to deal with it until you just work it out and get better. And I think if you could try to embody that as much as possible and get to this point where nothing really bothers you and you're just kind of doing your dharma, man, you're kind of living your life that way, I think that you could see the positive benefits in it. And then that'll speak for itself. And then if it doesn't work in the next life, you could be evil, whatever. But I mean, who knows? Maybe you have to live an evil life in order to know that it's bad than to live a good one. And make that choice. Maybe that's what the veil forgetfulness really is about. Over and over, you have to make this choice until it's ingrained in your soul.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
we're just oversharing now. So
totally. But to go back to, because I was saying all that for a reason and I lost my train of thought.
Yikes.
I went to multiple different places. But this concept of the law of one talks about like these benevolent beings who have already graduated. They've already gone through a 3D like us, but they're already past it. So they're now light beings, because basically that's what we are. We're energy, we're light, but we're in this energetic, which appears to be a physical body, but it's a mind, body, spirit complex is what the law of one calls it.
It's a trinity.
So it's a trinity. Yeah.
That's why things are so big. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So, but these beings who have already passed this test, or whatever you want to call that, maybe that's not the best way to say it, but the light beings who have, I would say, just graduated from 3D, I should say, maybe been harvested into their light bodies, and either they have skipped 4D because they were negative and they thought there's no reason for having love, which is the 4D, or they went through the 4D, they experienced the love, and they were able to graduate to 5D and then 6D, whatnot. So these beings are, they're benevolent beings, and they can help us when we request help. So, but they don't infringe upon our free will. So who knows if the guy who was in that car going through the tree, he closed his eyes and maybe he asked for help or something. Yeah, we don't know what went through his mind, but something happened, or, he just imagined him. Maybe he imagined himself in a better place.
Maybe he just
wasn't
afraid.
He wasn't afraid, right? It's just like, well, I guess this is happening right now, whatever it is. I accept it. I accept what it is. And it didn't cause any harm. And so when because we are literally, like, scientifically, they can't even tell you that this is real matter. Like, if you go and you take a microscope and you keep going and deeper, it's just all energy. It's just all frequency, vibration, that all these molecules, or whatever you want to call them, are vibrating at such a speed that they produce a likeness of this physical body that we have. But, you go and look at other accounts of different, just different accounts, even in that, I think it was that book of the Jesus Code that I was reading, where the guy who was, I think they went to Iceland, or I can't even remember where it was. They went to watch this man meditate, and they were watching him as he meditated. They were watching pieces of his body disappear as he was meditating. And he could have probably disappeared completely if he wanted to, but then he would come back. So it's not impossible, right? We're just not conditioned to think that it's okay. Like, I was saying this the other day, like, what is paranormal stuff? I was just saying this I think I sent it to Brandon and Spoons, but I was like, what is considered paranormal? And the paranormal is just something that we don't experience often. And so we deem it as ridiculous and impossible, but it happened, right? Some people have experienced it. Some people have seen it. So it happened. So it's just an indoctrination to you to say, oh, no, that's impossible. But it's possible. We just have to remember and relearn how to do it again. Because maybe back in the day we knew how, and now we don't. We've lost it. We've forgotten who we are. We've forgotten our power. But
what's that?
Go ahead.
If you want to truly enslave people, or people allow themselves to be slaves, you have to lose all this stuff, all this knowledge, because somebody who's that empowered and doesn't think they're a victim isn't going to be a slave to no matter what it is. So, and I think also, because we were talking about no fear, maybe it was just no fear. And then also the belief. I think belief has a lot to do with the way this realm works.
Huge.
Yeah, and then action toward that belief.
Right. So if you don't believe that you're going to be harmed, if you believe that everything's going to be okay and everything's going to work out for you and you're going to be okay, could it be?
Yeah, and then your actions are actually aligning with that thought. So it's not like you're delusional, like you're just, not doing what needs to be done. You're still doing it. And that's also part of your belief system, because you're like, hey, look, I have, I support myself. I'm good to people. I do all these things. So nothing's going to happen to me because I'm on my path. So it supports that belief. And then that causes you to not have any fear in this situation. So they kind of all work together.
Yeah. And
so
it's all,
you can't really fake it,
Yeah. It's all making sense and all coming together for me, because I remember months ago, even saying on this podcast, saying things like, I don't see that as part of my karma. And it's because I wasn't, you know what I mean? I wasn't being hurtful or harmful to people or anything to see some of those things, whatever I was talking about, as effect, like even coming into my like realm. Like I just don't see that happening because I'm just thinking to myself, well, what would I have to learn from that I haven't already learned? Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Because you're not looking at yourself like a victim. I think that's really what it is. You know, when I worry about something, for example, and I try to break it down and dissect it, say like I'm worried about how a wedding is going to go when I go DJ, you know, something I got to do.
Or what you might have been worried about last time we recorded.
Oh, yeah, which totally is working out. Instead of worrying about it, you know, the worrying is because I'm worried what people are going to think if it doesn't go the way it's supposed to. And right there, all you're doing is attaching yourself to the outcome, which, you know, Krishna says you shouldn't do in the Bhagavad Gita. Like a lot of people say this, a lot of these don't get attached to the outcome, right? You just do what you have to do. You do your best. And all you know, you're just satisfied because you know that you did your best. And it's the ego comes in the false way, obviously, when you start to get attached to the way it comes out. And I'm not saying this is like great for every circumstance yet. You know, I don't know. I'm not judging anybody, but I'm just saying this is something I'm working on. So I feel like the more that I can do that, the more that the stuff doesn't manifest. Everything goes fine. When I stopped worrying about how weddings were going to go a couple of years ago, because I used to get more nervous, everyone just worked out awesomely. And I even said to myself, I'm like, I've made mistakes. I've always recovered. Everything's been fine. You know, I mean, I've seen a lot of crazy things when I'm DJing, but it's all worked out and everyone always had a good time. Everyone always liked me and liked what I did. So why am I even worrying? This is stupid. And then it's like, you're just basically telling that little voice in your head that you're stupid. What's wrong with you? But then I learned to love that voice in my head too. And this helped in my journey because I would say to myself, oh, that voice exists because it's just trying to keep me safe. It's looking out for me. You know, that has positive benefits. In the past, it was a real help, blah, 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 all this stuff. So in this way, that's real shadow work. We're just kind of bringing this in because we're oversharing. That's really shadow work because I'm accepting that part of myself instead of trying to push it away. Because, yeah, I know it's bad, but it's still part of me, right? So that's my shadow. So that's what I have to look at and make friends with. And then as I do it, it's just become a lot easier to not worry about the future and just know it's going to be fine. And then, like we've said before, the worst that can happen is you die, and everyone's going to die anyway. So, dude, speaking of that, I should tell this story. I mean, I guess I could have died. You never know. I was driving down the street yesterday. I sent Sharon a little voice message about this. And there's these back roads. It was all residential area. And it's basically like a main road that goes through all these side streets. And one of the side streets, there's a big hill. Well, you know, it's like a decent sized hill. And I'm going down and I look and there's a car that looks like it was backing out of that street. And it was kind of rainy and dark. So everyone had their lights on and this didn't have its lights on. It was a Volkswagen Passat, a green one. And so it started to roll down and I went just right past it. And as I did, I looked at my rear view and it went behind me. And I was like, wow, that person's like backing out quick. And then I'm like, wait a minute, there's no one in that car. And it just kept going. And at the bottom of that street where it intersected, there wasn't another street. There was a driveway and it just went into the driveway and hit the other car that was in there. Yeah.
So they didn't park it correctly and the brake wasn't on, or it was just slippery.
Yeah. It was definitely either the e-brake failed or maybe they have, because those cars I think came with stick shift. So it's possible they had it reverse and maybe they had a remote start and they forgot because that happened to my roommate twice. He had this giant Jeep with a remote starter and the driveway went down. So he would like park in the grass and then the road would come right behind it. It was kind of like not like a main road, but people come flying down that street. And so he remote started his Jeep one morning, and it just started and just went right into the street, and it backed into, we were across from this Catholic high school. So it was just woods and a fence. So it just backed, and it was just like driving into the fence. It was so funny. He like ran out there freaking out. But yeah, it
Oh my
happened twice,
gosh.
but he didn't hit any cars. But this car was really close to hitting me. So if I was a few seconds earlier, it could have been like a way worse collision, you know? So
Yeah, I
anyway,
gotta wonder what the karma was for the people in that driveway. I'm just kidding.
got to learn how to drive, lady. No, I don't know.
But
Yeah, but it was just a
yeah.
crazy thing I wanted to share because it was very synchronistic. I was like, I was gonna stop, and I was like, you know what? I was already like down the road before I realized, because it was like in my rear view. I'm like, what the hell's going on back there? But yeah, if somebody was in the car, I would have stopped. But I could see there was no one in the car, so nobody got hurt.
Cool.
Yeah.
So back to Archaix's work.
Yes.
There are some topics that I kind of want to reconcile, I suppose you could say, with the law of one. But one of the topics that he brings up actually kind of helps shed light on the recent topics of like Tartaria and giants and stuff like that, right? And mud floods and all this stuff, right? So just to briefly say, for example, all these events that happen, some of these events that happen, they're not necessarily worldwide. Some of them are very localized. So,
the resets.
Yeah, some of the resets that Jason talks about are localized. So the stuff that Ewar was talking about on his videos about, okay, I really need to just look at this from a local point of view versus a worldwide point of view. He was going in the right direction. So it kind of makes me wonder, like, I wish that they two could talk as well. You know, that would be interesting to get them to talk. But so that whole topic. And so if there were things like mud floods or whatever, like they were definitely probably regional things. Like there wasn't necessarily like a giant thing for the whole world. But
well, yeah,
there was something that was worldwide.
Yeah.
And that was called the vapor canopy.
And then after it collapsed, there was the Great Flood,
okay. So basically, as I understand it, this vapor canopy was like when you read the book of Genesis before the Great Flood, that's a vapor canopy world. So there was the waters above, you know, the waters below, right? And it never rained because the oxygen in the air was so concentrated, and like dew would appear in the morning on the ground. So like everything was fed. There was a lot of oxygen. There was a lot of moisture. Things grew to ginormous proportions. People, animals, everything, plants, everything was enormous. So that can explain the giants, the titans, all that stuff, right? And these canopies, these vapor canopies I think they would happen after a reset. And so some people always wondered why the book of Genesis started off with, and I think Zaralath confirmed this at one point, one time when we were live chatting on one of the streams, but that the words tohu vavohu in Hebrew, they imply that it was already, like it was destroyed, not that it was just, it just looked like it was like nothingness. No, it implied destruction. So in other words, there was a reset and then there was this vapor canopy. So this vapor canopy lasted however many years. And then you have the great flood, because that canopy collapsed, caused this great flood, right? So once that canopy collapsed, these people that were growing to giant proportions were now no longer going to grow to giant proportions. So as time went on, their children were smaller and smaller and smaller and living shorter lifespans, because this canopy, vapor canopy, provided for them to live to like almost 1,000 years. And you see that in the Old Testament, like there were people who were living up to like 990 something. I forgot who was it. Starts with an M. The guy's name who lived that long. I forgot his name now.
Micah?
No, it was a longer name. I forgot his name, but anyway, these people were living like hundreds of years, right? So,
Abraham too.
And did Abraham? Yeah, I don't remember. So these people were living these hundreds of years, and it makes me also think about, so that to me reconciles everything with the whole like, well, were there giants in this place? And why do rocks look sometimes and mountains look like giant trees that were like broken and all that stuff? It starts to make sense, right? That makes sense. That kind of like starts making sense. Now, the other thing that is what I want to reconcile with the law of one is, because I believe Aaron Abke on his show, on his like series that he's doing on the law of one, he talks about the great flood too. And so he talks about pre-flood and post-flood stuff. And I'm trying to remember the stuff he talks about, but I want to reconcile that and how it would line up with that. And he also talks about the Egyptians and the pyramid, and so does Jason of Archaix. He talks about not the Phoenicians. Yes, he talks about the Phoenicians, but he talks about the Egyptians and the Great Pyramid, and how the Great Pyramid was built by. He thinks the Great Pyramid. So Jason of Archaix thinks the Great Pyramid was built by the beneficiary, the benefactor, the one who is like the creator or whatever, okay, so he says Enki, who was demonized. And basically he's like, if anybody's demonized in this world, to flip the script, because, they're probably definitely not telling the truth about that. So he's talking about the benefactor building this as a, I forgot how he describes it, but it has in it built in these dimensions, and it's like 138 is one of those numbers found in those dimensions, if I'm explaining it correctly. Now, what I find interesting is the raw material talks about, because Ra again is this collection of light beings who have decided that they're benevolent, I guess is a good word, that they're on the spectrum of positive versus negative polarity, and they come to help us and come to our aid if we ever ask, right? And they saw that the Egyptians at that time needed help. Now, I'm trying to remember if he said the people after, because I think Aaron Abke talks about how people were living hundreds of years before that, but then at some point they weren't. And I forgot what cataclysmic event, I think it was the Great Flood, that he says caused them to like now live shorter lives or something. I can't remember. So I want to go revisit that. But basically the Egyptians were now living allegedly lifespans of 30 years, like very, very short. So Ra, this social memory complex, which are light, collective consciousness of light beings, came to their aid and wasn't going to, like we said last time, wasn't going to woke rape them, but was going to see if they can help them. And because they worshiped the sun god, I think, and they called it Ra, I think that's why I can't remember chicken or the egg, whether Ra told them we're Ra and they're like, oh, you're the sun god, so we're going to call, you know what I mean? So I don't know how that worked out, but anyway,
I think they named him Ra.
Okay. Because of the sun god thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So they probably named the social memory complex Ra. And so Ra allegedly, they say, built the pyramid for them, for the Egyptians, to help them. So I feel like there's like stuff there that's like, I want to reconcile and make sense of it, because these Egyptians were living only about 30 years. And prior to that, they were living hundreds of years. So they had all this time to live a life, or that's what it was. He said that, so Jason of Archaix says flood was when people stopped, or vapor canopy, and flood is when people stopped living those long lives. Ra says it was because of the introduction of the veil of forgetfulness. With the veil of without like knowing your past, your lives and stuff, there was no infighting, there was no like warring there. Everyone was getting along. So they would live these hundreds of years. So when they introduced the veil of forgetfulness, that's when you started living much shorter lives, because people were starting to be like, oh, I'm going to war with you and I'm going to hurt you and I'm going to kill you, because they were just experimenting with their free will, right? So these Egyptians were allegedly living 30 years, which was not enough time for them to even get to the next level. So that's why Ra came to try to help them. So that's one of the things I kind of want to reconcile and try to figure out how that works together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the funny part is like, so you described how terrible it was. People were only living till 30 allegedly. So Ra had to come and talk to him, but then he had to come and talk to him in the 80s. Like, how bad was it in the 80s? Where he's like, man, these people are fucking up. I gotta come to Earth and channel with this lady. But
and I think they were asking though, like, because the channelers, or the medium and the one who was asking the questions and the one who was the scribe, they had been doing like channeling, well, at least a couple of them had been channeling since the 70s. And so at some point they reached Ra. And then that's when they were like, oh, because I watched some of the material from the llresearch.org. I think I watched one of the videos from their YouTube website, or their YouTube site channel. And I believe it was a case of like, oh, we found a really good one to channel. Like, this is a really good channel coming in. And because Ra was so specific about how everything had to be, and was so very caring about what they called the medium, they called her the instrument. So they were like, the instrument is getting tired. If you do this, if you adjust her here, move the crystal that's there, turn it 90 degrees, whatever. Like, they had very specific instructions about how to care for her so that she could channel for a little bit longer if they still wanted to ask Ra more questions.
The instrument needs a rum and coke. No. Bring the instrument a margarita. Yeah, that's pretty amazing stuff, though.
And Aaron Abkey also interviewed Jim McCarty. I think he was the scribe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that one was like an hour and a half, maybe an hour or hour and a half episode, which was very, very enlightening, very interesting. But yeah, really, really interesting stuff. We're at about an hour. I don't know if you have any other things you want to talk
Yeah,
about.
I did want to elaborate a little bit on the vapor canopy, so we don't have to, so we can lay it down for our great listeners. But apparently there was a bunch of water in the mesosphere, whatever sphere, that layer of the sky.
Mhm.
So that's what they're referring to as the waters above. So there's all this water up there, and maybe it had to work with the buoyancy at the time. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's some kind of phenomenon that happens in this realm, but all the water was up there. So during the day, you couldn't see the sun. So there was no sun worship. There was no sun gods. It was all lunar because at night you could still see the moon. And the water had this effect where it was like a telescope. So people could see the stars much better. And Zerlath, shout out to him, check out his channel. I was hanging out with him yesterday, and he was saying how he thinks that instead of like when you see Aries and you can look up and you see the constellation that kind of sees it, he's like, he thinks that maybe at some point it gets to where you can actually see, because there's so many stars, you could see the ram. It's like he thinks it's going to be where people aren't going to be able to deny that it's some kind of projection up in the sky, because it just is going to mimic all these wonderful things that we don't really see. So anyway, during the day, during these vapor canopy conditions, and also what I wanted to throw in was he found evidence of this in several books, and a lot of other people are studying this and alluding to this time and studying the animals, because he thinks that even like their lizards were bigger and all this stuff, and maybe that's what people were talking about, dinosaurs. And this was like up to what, 1600 BC or something like that. So it wasn't that long ago. You know, it wasn't like thousands and 10,000s of years ago. It was
Billions
like
and millions.
billions and millions. It was more recent of an event. So, anyway, get back to what I was saying. During the day, it was like a purple, like a light
Purple
purple
sky.
outside. And it just allowed for everything to grow much larger, because like Sharon was saying, there's more oxygen. It was in way more oxygen rich environment. And it never rained, just like they say in the Bible about the time before the flood. It never rained, but at night, and 2 times I guess a day, there were allegedly, we don't really know, but there was all this dew that would just come down and water everything. It was more like a terrarium. And he also talks about where they've duplicated these conditions in certain biosphere, like in Texas and all these places. They do like these college experiments and all this stuff where they duplicate it, and they've gotten stuff to grow larger, even like lizards to be bigger and all this stuff.
Even people. He said the 2 people involved in one of those experiments grew like 2 inches.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And you recently just grew an inch.
I know. What's going on? Ooh, I'm living in the vapor canopy life, lady.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what the vapor canopy is, and then the collapsing of it was all that water coming down.
And
And these resets sometimes are just like Sharon was saying, like it's a local phenomenon, but every 138 years, it seems like there's this Phoenix phenomenon that happens. And then there's a bigger one that's more of a realm wide. And that looks like he's saying 2046. But the thing again is to not fear, because he's saying even the book of Revelations, when they teach it to you in church and stuff, he's like, they kind of got it wrong. Like this is the time.
they have it backwards.
They have it backwards. This isn't a judgment for people who are living the way they should be. This is more of like an age flip to like maybe a golden age, because they're saying that he thinks that another vapor canopy is going to come after that.
Yeah.
And what it's going to do is it's just going to flip everything, invert it, and the last what shall be first and the first shall be last. And we're not like new age or pie in the sky. It's like, yeah, man, we're going to be perfect. But we're just saying this is what we think is possible. So this is why you shouldn't have fear, because if you don't fear these events, they don't affect you at all. No matter what happens, a way out will be given. It's just like in the Matrix with the key maker. You know, he's like running through these doors, opening up, and they're going to different realms. Like, we don't know how this works. Maybe you get teleported. Hey, maybe it's your time to go. And what a glorious way to go. But then you just go into your next life. But I don't think it's going to be like that. I think people like us are going to be shown away as long as we just listen to that inner voice, that intuition. You know, maybe our intuition is just an angel speaking to us telepathically, you know.
Or I think he even says
Our higher
it's
selves.
our higher self.
Yeah.
Yeah. from like maybe from, or like I think Aaron Abke talks about it as like our 60 self coming back to us in time, to all our past lives, and being there as a just as a help to us, right?
Yeah.
Which
And
is
another
kind of
thing
an interesting topic.
I want to say about Archaix, his predictions for the future, the way he's making them, he'll find these anchor points in time, like 1976 was one I know because I was born. And he'll use 1998 as the pivot point, and then he'll go 22 years in the future, which is crazy because that, for me, 2020 was that. It was 22 years from 1998 and then 22 years to 1976 when I was born. So 2020 was a really pivotal year in my life also. And so was 1998, which is just really crazy. So this is the kind of stuff that we're talking about. We're having like experiential um things that are happening in our lives. And when I say 1998 was a big year, like it's the year I got out of the Marines, it always stuck out to me as like one of the best years of my life, just because where I was in the Marines for, I got out in September. So that whole 9 months in the Marines was like my best time. I was like at the beach every day. I worked night crew where I would just go in for like an hour, and then I didn't really have much work to do because when you have short time, they put you in a shop where there's not much to do. In night crew, there's really nothing to do. So I would just take off and just call in once in a while. So I'd go back to the beach. So I was just living this great life, and then when I got out, it was really fun too. And then I got working and started doing all this stuff. So it was this pivotal year in my life. And of course, I was born in '76. That's when I entered the realm. And then 2020, I mean, it was a pivotal year for everybody. But I feel like for me, a lot of things happened. I grew my hair out, like I started recording all this stuff. I recorded with a bunch of people that were like internet famous kind of. But then I also had this whole shift in the way I saw the world, and it really had to do with having a lot less fear. And the same thing like when I got out of the Marines and stuff. So anyway, the reason I say all that is because I feel like it really does resonate with me. And so the way he kind of predicts these things in the future, he's saying that in 2022, this year and next year, there's going to be what seems to be some kind of political flip, like stuff we'd read about in history, but where all this stuff that's going on right now gets exposed, maybe the current leaders, like he thinks a president's going to be impeached in 2022, or like taken out of office. And again, he kind of looks at this like in the way we do, where it could all be a show and, these people are just actors, but it's just being played out because that's the show that needs to work. People maybe are just sick of all this stuff. And so they got to make it more right wing, but that's kind of good news for people like us, because it does mean more freedom. Even though we know it's a show and we don't have to become like supporters of the Orange Man, but we can understand that there's more of them. I mean, dude, there's so many Trump supporters, like even in Connecticut, which I live, it's supposed to be a blue state. People just had enough. And again, we're not like a political show. We don't think Donald Trump has the answers, but at the end of the day, the people that run the show have to give the people the show that they really want, or else they'll be like in the streets. You know what I mean? Like, so I feel like a switch is going to come too. I've already heard that from a bunch of people. I think even Owen Benjamin said he's always talking about like a script flip and stuff. So I think that's part of what is going to happen. And we can even look into that further. But
Yeah. They just
yeah,
have to have someone to blame, is all they're doing.
yeah, totally. Yeah.
They
And
set them up. They set these people up. That's what Jason was saying too. They set them up, like the Facebook owner dude or whatever, all those guys, they set them up to behave a certain
Microsoft
way.
guy.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
boy.
Yeah. And then so they set them up and they basically shoot themselves in the foot and become the scapegoats, the people to blame.
Yep. And no matter how it works, even if it's just the way the realm works, because these people have all this power but they're not aligning themselves with truth. So at the end of the day, they're going to fall on their heads. But either way, yeah, I think that's possible, because if you want to keep your population happy, you got to give them some wins sometimes, You don't want them to see their change directly.
Yeah.
But, Yeah.
So another thing that you said, which is to me is you made me think about it, is the moon. So it's mind blowing and kind of baffling that he says the moon was not always here. And the way he sees the moon. So he said that the moon appeared in 4039 BC. And I can't remember. And I think he says in the Anuna calendar files that he has, it shows that information. But so prior to that, there was no moon in the sky. And he says that he thinks the moon is a key or a tell that we're living in something simulated because, something he said in that 3-hour tour was like crazy. He said back even in the 60s, people would like look at the moon and zoom in and see things in the like, I don't know if portals, but whatever, something opening up and then closing or whatever, all those craters or whatever that you see, like one of them would open up and then like you would visibly see that happening on the moon. So, I mean, I don't know. I've never seen it, but he said that there were accounts of these people having seen these odd things on the moon. And he says that the phases of the moon are kind of a tell, because it's almost like they wanted us to think we're living on a spinning ball. Well, maybe not spinning, but just a ball. Because if you see a ball in the sky that then starts getting crescent shaped over time because of the other ball in the sky, then you're going to think that they're balls and you're going to think you're living on a ball, something to that effect, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But the whole moon thing makes me wonder about, because the moon has been tied to so many things. So it just makes me wonder, like, of course, people say the tides and all that stuff are tied to the moon. And women say the cycles are tied to the women's cycles, women's menstrual cycles. That's why they call them menstrual, because they're moon based, men, moon, whatever, right? So I just wonder to myself, like, prior to there being an alleged moon, what was the deal? Like, did women not have cycles? Did they have them and they just weren't aligned to, like, I don't even get, like, I don't even get it.
And just wasn't visible.
And then that makes me wonder about Rahu and Ketu, which is the Vedic stuff, where it's like, I don't know if they're the nodes or if there's they're kind of like alleged things in the sky that hide the moon during eclipses and stuff like that. Like, I'm not quite sure. I don't know enough about them, but it's very interesting for sure.
Yeah.
And Adam probably knows a little bit more, because he talked about Rahu Ketu, and he has one of the books and stuff. I think I have it too, a PDF form of the book. But yeah, just really, really interesting stuff.
Yeah. Anything else?
Something else he said in that 3-hour episode, which I thought was very interesting, if nobody's going to be able to watch it, but he said that he said, okay, you have like mammals and you have marsupials and you have all these different kinds of animals. And he said that we, quote, humans, or whatever you would want to call us, he said we're placentals, which I'd never heard before. And so, I mean, his perspective is that we are genetically modified, because he says when an embryo attaches to the uterine wall in a female, he said that's a parasitic trait and it's not natural in nature. Which, yeah, I don't really know what that means. He says it's almost as if we humans were manufactured and that we're not natural creation. So that's also another interesting point of view. Mind you, I take all his stuff and I'm just putting in the back of my mind. Even Crow was talking about this the other day, where he's like, I think it was on the episode with Dylan Sakosha, which was really good. I always like those with Dylan because Dylan knows so much about language. He can see all the ways that languages are related, and when we've been told that they are not related, I mean, that's utter bull crap, right? I always wondered because I've always been very interested in language. And so for me to hear like, oh, the Basque language is unlike any other language in the world, and the Finnish language is the same. There's no history to, well, it's like, I don't know. I don't know if I believe you. Like, there's no way that it's not related to something. Yeah. It's like, I've been hearing too, and I think Jason talks about this as well, is that like the Hebrew language, even like the natives of like the Incas or the Mayans or the Aztecs or whatever, these people spoke, it's basically they spoke a variation of Hebrew, but since they didn't write it down the way they did, there was no, it was all oral. And so they didn't write it down. So they didn't realize that it was basically related. It was the same language. So, I mean, anyway, I just went off on a total rabbit trail and I don't even know where I started. Oh, Crow, because Dylan was on Crow and Crow was talking about, what was he saying? Oh, that he takes information from all sorts of sources and he just has it back there in his mind for future reference. Like, and I think that's what you and I do. I mean, that's what I've been doing my whole life, is just, I have that stuff back there. Hopefully I remember it. And if something makes a connection to a question that I've always had, then I'm like, sweet, that makes sense now. Just like for me, the language thing. It's like, I'm sure there's connections. I'm sure there are connections with this whole language thing. And one day I'd like to talk to Dylan Sakosha if possible, or, I don't know, just ask him some questions about that, about languages. But
I've always found that fascinating.
Yeah. But there were lots of things Jason talked about on that 3-hour show. And he talked about holograms. I don't know if you, do you remember what he talked about there? Because holograms for me it's something that's like kind of new-ish to me, and I'm not super well versed on how that all works.
Yeah, from what I remember, he was talking about how holograms work and how everybody's kind of has their own hologram, but then we have this collective one also. So, but I think the individual overrides the collective. So that's why we always talk about these things like shadow work and stuff, where that's how maybe somebody in a truck could survive going through a tree if they really are just in some kind of realm or simulacrum or simulation or matrix type setup. Because if it really isn't physical, then maybe there's just some laws that are put into place and those laws can't be broken, but maybe through belief and no fear they can be somehow. Maybe those laws exist because we believe they exist. But anyway,
right. Like, I can't put my hand through this wall because I believe that there's a law that prevents me from putting my hand through the wall without hurting myself.
Exactly. And the only way to get over that is to be crazy or to find a belief system to get you there. So,
right.
So that's how he talks about holograms. I don't remember too much more than that.
Okay.
But.
So that said, what you said kind of reminded me of, like, when you say your own individual, like, belief overrides the collective or whatever, that reminded me of the episode that Christopher Gardner did with Owen, where like the last 30 minutes stuff starts going insane, like computers start crashing and acting stupid, and the internet starts acting weird. And because they were talking about how you see the sun, it's like you see the sun like individually, like it's all individual. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I still need to wrap my head around how that whole discussion, if you can. I don't know.
Well, I think that's probably part of the hologram where Chris Gardner was saying how, well, I guess to back up a little bit, what you're saying with the phenomenon, I think a lot of people are starting to lose their belief in this system. So when all those people were listening to the truth, it just kind of was sending, because so many people were resonating with it, it was just kind of sending waves out there somehow, you know, and just wonky stuff was happening. But as far as the sun, he's saying that it's experienced locally for every person. They have their own experience with it. And then there's just this collective shared one also, because we all look up and we see the sun and stuff. But he was saying how that the degree of the angle or whatever, just somehow they're trying to prove that everybody kind of sees it in their own individual way. It's kind of like how the moon follows you when you're driving on the highway through trees and you see the moon following you. Like, it's moving so fast. It's kind of weird like that. Like, I mean, I guess we're so much farther away from it. That's how it would appear. But it's sort of like that, though, that phenomenon. And he was also saying how it's been known that people disperse clouds and have the sun come out, and at different emotional times, like weddings, it might rain a little bit. Or if it's going to be rainy, the sun comes out, you know. It's just because everybody in that area, they're engaged in this belief. And if that's how they want it to be and they believe it's going to be that way, then it happens. Or maybe if they all get emotional, it rains, you know. So that's kind of what he was talking about.
Yeah. Wow. Good stuff.
Yeah. Is that it?
I mean, I could look through notes and see if there's anything else, but we talked about a lot of stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I didn't mean it in that regard. I didn't mean it like we need more.
Do we need more?
No, I think we're good.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to ask Jason so many questions, but we'll have to dig through his material and see if we can find answers. And maybe one day we'll send him a question in an email.
Manifest it.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. This has been the Over Sharon Show. Thank you guys so much for hanging out in the live chat. Thank you guys so much for all your comments. We really appreciate them. We always take them into consideration. So if you have any questions, just leave it in the video below or ask it in the chat. We will totally address it. If you have any requests or anything you want us to do or talk about, let us know. And let's see what else. There's several ways to support us. Go to morelawsmoreproblems.com. Click on the Over Sharon tab. The link's probably in the video description below. So just click there. And or if you want to reach out to us, you could do that through that website as well. And I think that's it. What do we say to the good Sharon? What do we say to the good people, Sharon?
That if you're not over Sharon,
then you're totally not Karen.
That's right.
Yep, so keep sharing. Later, everybody. Ciao.